Welcome to the Book Nook. We are so glad you're here. If you're new, this is our deep dive where we explore the most, transformative books in psychology, spirituality, and personal growth.
Yeah, and today we are stepping right into the deep end, like the really deep end.
Oh, absolutely. We're unpacking Jonathan Haidt's groundbreaking new book. It's called The Anxious Generation. And it's all about how the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness.
Right. And to really get into this, we actually need to start with a thought experiment that Haidt uses right at the beginning of the book.
Yeah, it's so good. Okay,
Okay.
so I want you to imagine you have a child, your first child, and they've just turned 10 years old.
A very impressionable age.
Exactly. And out of the blue, this visionary billionaire, somebody you have totally never met, selects your 10-year-old to join the very first permanent human settlement on Mars.
Right. Which, sounds like the setup for some dystopian sci-fi novel.
It totally does.
Yeah.
But the parameters of this thought experiment are meticulously chosen for a reason, because your kid was chosen based on their academic performance, their behavioral patterns, and like a deep analysis of their genome.
Which is data you definitely do not remember giving anyone consent to analyze.
Right. And the clincher is that, unbeknownst to you, your 10-year-old actually signed herself up for this. She loves space, she wants an adventure, and every single one of her friends has signed up too.
So she's begging you, right? Just pleading with you to let her go.
Exactly. She's weeping, saying if she stays behind, she'll be totally alone. Before you just say a hard no, you decide to do a little research into the actual physical conditions on Mars.
Which is what any responsible parent would do. You want to know what you're sending your kid into.
Right. And what you discover is terrifying. You learn this company is recruiting children because they think kids will adapt better to the low gravity of Mars.
Yeah, the working theory is that if a kid goes through puberty on Mars, their body will just permanently tailor itself to that environment.
But when you dig into the research, you realize it is entirely unknown if these kids could ever physically return to Earth. Like, our gravity might just crush them.
That's horrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
And so you keep digging. You look into the radiation. Earth has this invisible protective shield, the magnetosphere, right?
Right, which blocks cosmic rays.
Exactly. But Mars doesn't have one. So a massive amount of radiation would be constantly shooting through your child's developing cells. And the safety shields they built, they were only tested on adult astronauts.
Wow. So they never tested them on kids.
Never. The data doesn't exist. And then you look at the gravity. Mars has only 38% of Earth's gravity. We already know adult astronauts lose bone density in microgravity.
Yeah, and their muscles atrophy.
Right. And fluid pools in their brains, which literally pushes on their eyeballs and changes their shape. So what happens to a 10-year-old whose skeleton is still forming?
The risk of permanent deformities would just be astronomical.
Exactly. And did the billionaire planners do any safety testing on pediatric physiology? No.
Yeah.
They just want to beat their corporate rivals to Mars.
Right.
So, knowing all this, would you send your kid? Of course not. You'd slam your laptop shut. You'd say, this is insane.
And you'd think, well, thank God this is just a thought experiment. No corporation could ever legally take our kids to an untested environment without verified consent.
Right, but that's the punchline. The devastating reality is that society totally allowed this to happen.
Yeah. A group of highly motivated tech companies essentially executed this exact scenario.
It's chilling when you put it like that.
It really is. Starting in the early 2010s, tech companies built an untested, entirely unregulated virtual Mars, an alternative universe with completely different physics and social gravity.
And they sent Gen Z, an entire generation of children, to grow up in this alien environment during their most vulnerable developmental window.
Right. And they fundamentally altered their neurological development, all without any real verified parental consent.
The result is exactly what you'd expect. A massive global psychological crisis.
Yeah.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to explore exactly what happened between 2010 and 2015.
Which Haidt calls the great rewiring of childhood.
Yes. We'll look at the backstory of how we lock kids inside, how boys and girls are suffering differently, and crucially, Haidt's 4 actionable steps to bring our kids back to Earth.
So to truly grasp the magnitude of this, we really need to look at the symptoms first. We have to pinpoint exactly when this epidemic started.
Right, because if we're claiming an entire generation was sent to a hostile environment, what exactly did it do to them? What's the damage report?
Well, if we look at the data from the early 2010s, it's pretty shocking. Usually when social scientists track generational shifts, the lines on the graph look like gentle hills. Cultures evolve slowly.
Sure, yeah.
But the mental health data for teenagers leading up to 2010 is relatively flat. There's a baseline of teen angst, but no sign of a collapse. Then, right around 2012, the line doesn't just curve, it goes vertical.
Like a hockey stick.
Exactly like a hockey stick. We see this unprecedented surge in major depressive episodes. For teens, the rate increased by about 150% between 2010 and the end of the decade.
Wait, 150%? That is almost too big to process.
It really is. Clinical depression became 2.5 times more prevalent, completely regardless of race or social class.
That's not a slow cultural drift. That's a sudden environmental toxin. But I want to make sure we categorize this correctly. When people hear teenage mental health crisis, they picture rebellious teens acting out, getting into fights, skipping school.
Right, but that's not what the data shows.
Right.
In psychology, we categorize these into 2 buckets: externalizing disorders and internalizing disorders. Externalizing is what you just described. The distress is turned outward.
So kid punching a locker or shoplifting, the pain is loud.
Yes, exactly. But those behaviors actually continued to decline in the 2010s. What skyrocketed were internalizing disorders.
And that's when they turn the pain inward.
Precisely. Severe anxiety, clinical depression, self-harm, eating disorders, and deep social withdrawal. The individual ruminates endlessly. In college counseling centers during that decade, anxiety rose by 134%.
Wow. So it's an invisible epidemic, just an entire generation quietly collapsing inward behind closed bedroom doors.
Exactly.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here. Because whenever I talk about this with Gen Z, they push back hard. They're like, of course we're depressed. Look at the world. We have active shooter drills. Climate change is burning the planet. We saw the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah, and political polarization, right.
So it's so easy to construct a narrative that they're just having a logical response to a terrifying world. Why wouldn't those external terrors be the root cause?
It's an incredibly empathetic argument, and it makes intuitive sense. But when you apply rigorous sociological methodology to it, it completely falls apart.
Really? How so?
First, the timeline is the smoking gun. The 2008 crash was devastating, yes, but teen mental health remained remarkably stable in 2009, 2010, and 2011.
Oh, I see.
Right. It didn't spike until 2012 when the economy was actually recovering. Furthermore, older generations, Gen X or boomers, their rates of depression didn't surge by 150%.
Right, and they were living in the exact same economy, reading the same news.
Exactly. The spike is highly concentrated in Gen Z.
Okay, so the timing and demographics don't fit the financial crash. But what about the constant awareness of war or climate catastrophe? Doesn't living under a cloud of doom naturally create depression?
You would think so, but historically, macro-level existential threats do the exact opposite. Impending threats to a nation don't cause widespread clinical depression or isolation.
Wait, really?
Yeah. When a society faces a severe external threat, like a world war, citizens actually rally together. The threat acts as a binding agent that creates a profound sense of shared purpose.
That is counterintuitive, but it actually makes a lot of sense. So an external threat forces a community to bind together.
Exactly. Durkheim, the pioneering sociologist, noted this over a century ago. Historically, during times of acute national crisis, suicide rates actually drop.
Wow, because we're all in it together.
Right. When young people rally around a cause, even a terrifying one, it infuses their lives with meaning. Haidt points out that the world has always seemed broken.
Right, kids in the Cold War had nuclear duck and cover drills.
Exactly. So if historical trauma doesn't cause this specific flavor of isolated despair, what does? The only variable that changed globally, everywhere at once, for this specific age cohort was the rapid adoption of the smartphone and hyper-viralized social media.
And when you say globally, you mean everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Not just in America.
Right. This isn't just an American anomaly. We see the exact same hockey stick graphs in the UK, Canada, Australia, and the Nordic nations.
Wow, even the Nordic nations with their strong social safety nets.
Exactly. The smartphone is the only universal constant that fits the equation perfectly.
Okay, so the timeline is clear. The smartphone was the spark. But this is where Haidt's analysis gets really structural, because it's easy to just blame Silicon Valley.
Right. It's very satisfying to just point the finger at them.
It totally is. But Haidt argues we have to look further back. Why were these kids so vulnerable to being sucked into these screens in the first place? It actually started with parents in the 1980s and 90s.
This is definitely the most uncomfortable truth in the book for adults to confront. The Great Rewiring isn't just about the technology we introduced, it's about the vital developmental experiences we stripped away.
Right. Haidt marks the late 80s and 90s as the end of the play-based childhood.
Yeah. And we need to define that because play sounds like a luxury. But from an evolutionary perspective, human childhood was always characterized by extensive, unstructured free play.
Because our brains take so long to develop, right?
Exactly. It's an apprenticeship for complex cultural learning. Historically, kids went outside unsupervised, they roamed, they invented games. This play was physically embodied, and it forced them to navigate real-world friction.
But then, a massive psychological shift happened in parenting, driven entirely by love and fear.
Yes. In the 90s, we saw the rise of safetyism. Now, violent crime rates actually peaked in the early 90s and then dropped steeply. The world was getting safer.
But you wouldn't know from the news.
Right. The 24-hour cable news cycle started broadcasting rare, horrific events on a loop. So parents became paralyzed by the fear of kidnappers. Society decided the outside world was inherently dangerous.
Haidt brings in this brilliant concept from Alison Gopnik here, the analogy of the carpenter versus the gardener. It perfectly captures this anxiety.
It's a deeply illuminating framework. Gopnik points out that a carpenter takes raw materials and tries to meticulously control them to create a predefined product. It's total control, zero tolerance for error.
You don't want your table to suddenly grow a fifth leg. You want exactly the blueprint.
Right, but a gardener operates on a completely different philosophy. You can't force a seed to sprout. A gardener just creates a protected space, rich soil, water, and steps back to let it grow.
But driven by the fear of the 90s, we abandoned the gardener approach.
Exactly. We became anxious carpenters. We decided the real world was too risky for our delicate projects, so we supervised everything. We effectively bubble-wrapped childhood.
And the tragic irony is that by trying to keep them flawlessly safe, we made them incredibly fragile. We have to talk about anti-fragility.
Yes, popularized by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. He categorizes systems into three types. First, fragile things, like a crystal glass, drop it and it breaks.
Right.
Second, resilient things, like a block of iron, drop it, it stays the same. But then you have anti-fragile systems. These don't just withstand stress, they actually require stress and volatility to grow stronger.
Like the human immune system.
Exactly. Keep a kid in a sterile bubble, and the first time they encounter a common cold in the real world, it could be lethal. Haidt's point is that a child's psychological architecture is inherently anti-fragile.
I love the tree analogy here. In the 90s, they built Biosphere 2, this massive sealed glass dome. They planted trees inside, and they grew incredibly fast.
But then they just collapsed under their own weight.
Right. Yes. Because there was no wind inside the dome. Out in nature, wind stresses a young sapling, so it grows thick stresswood and deep roots. Without the wind, the tree is fundamentally weak. The first storm snaps it.
That maps perfectly onto childhood. Physical and social risk is the wind. Children need free, unsupervised play. They need to climb too high, wipe out on a skateboard, argue over the rules of a game.
Right, because that's how they learn to handle the storms of adulthood.
Exactly. When a kid climbs a tree, feels panic, slips, but catches themselves, their brain learns, I survived, I can handle danger. When we remove all the physical risks from the playground, we deny them that inoculation.
And this lack of wind literally changes the operating system of their brains. Haidt talks about discover mode and defend mode.
Right. When an animal feels safe, it's in discover mode, parasympathetic nervous system. Like a puppy exploring a yard, it's eager for new experiences. Let me grow, let me learn.
But then a predator appears, and it flips.
Violently switches gears into defend mode. Sympathetic nervous system. Cortisol floods the body, like a rabbit spotting a hawk. It freezes. It views every new situation as a potential threat.
And Haidt argues that by constantly hovering and signaling that the world is dangerous, we inadvertently locked our kids' brains into a chronic state of defend mode.
Yes, we fed them a narrative of fragility. So when Gen Z arrived on college campuses around 2014, administrators saw an influx of students who were genuinely terrified.
Right. They perceive normal social friction as literal threats to their safety.
Exactly.
So we had this perfect storm. We pulled an entire generation inside because the real world was too dangerous. But kids still have free time and a need to connect. So where did we put them?
We put them into the virtual world.
This is the bitter tragedy of it all. We profoundly overprotected them in the real world, and we criminally underprotected them in the virtual world.
It's the ultimate paradox. A parent in 2012 wouldn't let their kid walk 3 blocks to the park, but they'd hand them an unfiltered smartphone with access to the entire globe.
We left them to wander entirely alone in the wild west of the internet. We really need to break down how the real world and the virtual world are biologically incompatible.
Haidt lays out 4 foundational distinctions. First, real-world interactions are embodied. We use physical cues, facial expressions, tone of voice. This regulates empathy.
Right.
Second, they're synchronous. They happen in real time. Third, it's one-to-one or one-to-a-few. And fourth, real-world communities have a high bar for entry and exit. You can't just evaporate from your classroom.
Which means you're forced to repair relationships when conflicts happen. If you fight with your best friend, you still have to sit next to them tomorrow, so you learn to apologize.
Exactly. But the virtual world inverts all of this. It's disembodied, just text or curated images. It's asynchronous, which generates anxiety while waiting for replies.
Oh, that silence is the worst.
Yeah. Third, it's one-to-many broadcasting. You're performing for a vast, unseen audience. And fourth, it has a low bar for entry and exit. If a conflict arises, you don't navigate repair. You just press block.
Relationships become totally disposable.
Right. The friction required for human socialization is entirely removed.
It sounds like a sensory deprivation tank for human connection. And this brings us to viewing smartphones as experience blockers. Because it's not just the active harm of cyberbullying or unrealistic beauty standards.
It's what they aren't doing because the phone is in the way.
Right. It blocks sleep, which is the bedrock of mental health. It blocks in-person socializing, physical movement, and it blocks boredom.
Boredom is crucial. It's the precise state where creativity ignites. Haidt uses this metaphor. Imagine if we decided learning to walk was too dangerous, so we just handed an infant an iPad with documentaries about walking.
They'd never build the muscle memory, they'd never learn to walk.
Exactly. The smartphone consumes the hours needed to physically wire a healthy brain.
And we are introducing this blocker at the worst possible time. Puberty. What is actually happening underneath the skull during this time?
Early puberty is a period of furious brain rewiring. There's a massive amount of neural pruning. The brain ruthlessly prunes away synapses that aren't being used, keeping only the active ones.
Neurons that fire together wire together.
Exactly. And alongside this is myelination. The brain coats the surviving neural pathways with myelin, a fatty sheath. It acts like insulation on a copper wire, speeding up the brain's signals.
So the brain is incredibly plastic. It's begging for input on how to survive in adult society.
Yes. If a kid spends this time playing sports, navigating friend groups, the brain coats those pathways. It wires itself for resilience and embodied connection.
But if they spend those years alone in a bedroom, hunched over a screen, doom scrolling.
Their brain wires itself around that. The pathways that get heavily myelinated are the ones dedicated to intense anxiety, hypervigilance, social comparison, and fragmented attention.
We are permanently altering their neurological architecture. We're building brains optimized for a toxic virtual world, which leaves them unequipped for the real one.
It's devastating.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the virtual world didn't trap everyone the same way. The algorithms figured out exactly what adolescent girls want and what adolescent boys want and weaponized it.
Right. The data shows the mental health plunge hit girls first and hardest. To understand why, we have to look at the evolution of social media between 2009 and 2012.
Because early Facebook in, 2006 wasn't toxic. It was just a digital address book.
Exactly. But in 2009, Facebook introduced the like button and Twitter introduced the retweet button. Suddenly, social interactions had a public, quantified metric.
It became a performance scored in real time.
Then the iPhone 4 brought the front-facing camera in 2010. Selfies became the default. And in 2012, Facebook bought Instagram, cementing visual, algorithmically sorted feeds.
And this combination created an inescapable trap for girls. Why are they so much more vulnerable to this specific architecture?
Evolutionarily, girls are more intensely focused on interpersonal relationships and subtle forms of social inclusion or exclusion. While boys might assert dominance physically, girls manage status through relational aggression.
Like gossip and subtle ostracism.
Exactly. And tech companies hypercharged this. Social networks became performative social media. A 12-year-old girl suddenly had to constantly curate a personal brand to be judged by the crowd.
So the quantity of interactions exploded, but the quality plummeted. They're in a 247 world of intense visual comparison.
Seeing heavily filtered, perfect lives that make their own feel inadequate. And they live under the terror of relational aggression at scale. In the real world, a bad rumor might ruin your week at school.
But online, an embarrassing photo can live forever and be forwarded to thousands.
It brings the wrath of strangers down on you. It's perpetual, inescapable anxiety.
That's exhausting. So that's the uniquely devastating trap for girls. But what about the boys? Their mental health tanked too, but they weren't necessarily obsessing over Instagram selfies.
No, for boys, the trap wasn't performative social media. They retreated deeper into their bedrooms. While parents congratulated themselves for keeping boys physically safe, the boys were diving into immersive multiplayer games.
And YouTube, Reddit, and unlimited free hardcore pornography.
Yeah.
I have to bring up this story from the book. Haidt includes an essay from a teenager named Isabel Hogbin. She writes, "I was 10 years old when I watched porn for the first time. Where was my mother? In the next room, making sure I was eating 9 differently colored fruits and vegetables."
It's an agonizing indictment of our parenting paradigm.
Right. We micromanage their vegetable intake, but allow them frictionless access to the most extreme adult content imaginable.
And for boys, this endless digital stimulation bypasses their development into men. We see this epidemic of failure to launch.
Young men stalling out, not working, not dating, not leaving home.
Right. In Japan, they call the extreme version hikikomori young men who completely withdraw from society, locking themselves in their rooms for years. Evolution gave young men drives for status, mastery, adventure.
And in the real world, satisfying those drives requires hard work and facing rejection.
But the internet provides a frictionless bypass. Video games provide the thrill of the hunt and an illusion of high status. Porn provides the illusion of sexual conquest.
Massive dopamine hits without the required real-world skills.
Exactly. They don't have to face rejection or work hard. The virtual world provides empty calories.
But let me ask you what a lot of parents say here. They say, "My son games for 6 hours, but he's playing with his friends. They're laughing on headsets." Isn't that real community?
Haidt acknowledges games offer some benefits compared to doom scrolling. But sociologists differentiate between strong ties and weak ties. Strong ties are forged through shared physical presence and mutual vulnerability.
And weak ties are transactional.
Right. These virtual gaming packs offer an illusion of community built entirely on weak ties. The escape hatch is always available. If a conflict arises, you just log off. It replaces the hard work of maturing alongside physical peers.
Now, where does this lead them?
Haidt uses Durkheim's concept of anomie, a profound sense of normlessness, meaninglessness, and social alienation.
Because they're detached from physical communities.
Yes. They drift into a chaotic tornado of internet memes and anonymous networks. They have no roots. So a massive percentage of young men are drowning in this feeling of anomie, feeling life has no purpose.
It is so incredibly heavy. We have a generation of girls crushed by performative anxiety and boys drowning in isolated anime. Any parent or teacher listening right now might just feel total despair. Like the battle against these tech monopolies is lost.
And that's exactly where Haidt refuses to leave us. The brilliance of this book is that he provides a highly practical, essentially free blueprint to fix this. We have agency.
Yes, let's talk about the solution because it all hinges on the collective action problem.
Right. Parents listening might want to take their kid's smartphone away right now, but they feel paralyzed. Why? Because if you act alone, your child becomes a social outcast.
The party invites, the inside jokes,
Yeah.
they're all online.
Exactly. You feel forced to choose between their mental health and their social survival. It's a collective action trap. Individual willpower isn't enough. We have to move together as a herd.
If one parent does it, the kid is an outcast. But if 30 parents in the 6th grade agree to delay the smartphone, suddenly those kids have to find a new way to interact.
They start playing outside again. And Haidt outlines 4 foundational rules, bold norms we need to establish collectively to break this trap.
Okay, let's go through them. Rule number 1, no smartphones before high school.
Parents must collectively agree to delay unrestricted internet access. Before 9th grade, roughly age 14, kids should only get basic flip phones or smartwatches that only call and text pre-approved numbers.
No browser, no app store.
Exactly. The common objection is logistics. I need to know where my kid is. Well, a flip phone solves that. Hey, Mom, pick me up.
Right. You get the safety without putting the highly addictive internet in an 11-year-old's pocket. It makes total sense. Middle school is hard enough without a viral broadcasting device quantifying your worth. Rule number 2, no social media before 16.
By establishing this norm, we build a protective moat around that vulnerable window of puberty we talked about. We let the brain get through its hyperplastic stage.
Let them build a solid identity in the real world before we connect them to the fire hose of algorithmic comparison.
Exactly. Let them figure out who they are before the algorithm tells them who they should be.
Rule number 3 shifts to the schools. Phone-free schools. And Haidt does not mean keep it in your backpack.
No, the backpack policy is a total failure. If it's in the backpack, it's still occupying their cognitive bandwidth. They're anticipating the buzz, worrying about snap streaks.
It's a black hole for attention.
Yes. Haidt argues all schools must require students to store phones and smartwatches in locked pouches or secure lockers for the entire school day. A total digital dead zone.
And the results are amazing, right? The cafeteria gets incredibly loud.
Yes, because kids are actually talking to each other again, looking each other in the eye, telling jokes, flirting. It reestablishes the school as a physical community.
That's beautiful. And finally, rule number 4, which addresses the overprotection side. Far more unsupervised play.
We have to give them the real world back. We have to push against that anxious carpenter parenting mentality. Let kids walk to school together. Send them to the park without hovering.
Let them resolve their own disputes.
Right. We have to shift their nervous systems from defend mode back to discover mode by engineering situations where they can build physical competence.
What I love about these 4 rules is how empowering they are. And they cost almost nothing. A flip phone is cheaper than an iPhone. Playing outside is free. Locking pouches for a school is a tiny fraction of a tech budget.
Exactly.
We don't have to wait for Congress to pass laws. We don't have to wait for tech executives to suddenly care about child safety. Parents and schools can just decide to implement these norms tomorrow.
And the most hopeful part is that the human brain is resilient. The data suggests that if communities actually do this, we'll see massive improvements in adolescent mental health within a very short window, often just 2 years.
We can reverse the great rewiring. The damage is not permanent, and that's why the anxious generation is so culturally urgent. It's a roadmap out of the dark.
It really is. It's essential for parents, educators, and Gen Z themselves. It gives them the vocabulary to understand what was done to their brains and the power to demand a different life.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought from the end of the book. Because while this technology is new, the human struggle for focus and meaning is very old. Haidt quotes the ancient Stoic philosophers.
It's such a sobering way to close. Epictetus in the 1st century asked, "If your body was turned over to just anyone, you would doubtless take exception. Why aren't you ashamed that you have made your mind vulnerable to anyone who happens to criticize you?"
You hear that, and you instantly think of social media. If you hand your self-worth over to the comment section on TikTok, you are doing exactly what Epictetus warned against. You're handing the keys to your mind over to strangers.
And Marcus Aurelius warned against wasting our precious time worrying about what everyone else is doing and thinking. He said monitoring the crowd keeps you from cultivating your own mind.
If the ancients were warning us about distraction 2,000 years ago, imagine what they would say about a smartphone algorithm designed by supercomputers to hijack our dopamine.
It's daunting, but we have the power to step off Mars. We can protect our kids from the radiation of the virtual world.
We can give our children back the Earth. But it requires us to step out of our isolated anxieties and act together as a community.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for exploring this heavy but profoundly important topic with us today. If this conversation brought you some clarity or an aha moment you can use in your family, please subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss one of these deep dives.
We have so many more incredible books to unpack together.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.